The television in the activity room was on mute. That was the first thing I noticed about my life at Shady Pines nursing home. Muted sounds, quiet voices, the absence of anything that might disturb the other residents who were sitting in their chairs, staring at nothing, waiting for the day to end so they could sleep and start again tomorrow. My name is Iris, and I'm 78 years old, and I've been living in this place for 4 years. 4 years of beige walls and fluorescent lights, and the smell of industrial cleaner that never quite masks the smell of desperation. I placed the lottery ticket on my lap as I watched the drawing. I'd bought 1 ticket a week for the past 15 years. Every Wednesday, I'd ask one of the aides to stop at the convenience store. Every Wednesday, they'd roll their eyes, but they'd do it anyway, because I was the nice resident, the one who didn't make a fuss, the one who sat quietly in the activity room and watched the world happen on a television screen that was usually on mute. 6 numbers flashed across the screen. 6 numbers that didn't seem to mean anything at first. 6 numbers that might as well have been any other numbers. But then the lottery official announced the winning ticket. 6 numbers. My numbers. $247 million. I sat there in that activity room holding that ticket, and I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there, very still, and I understood something that I should have understood a long time ago. I understood that money changes everything. My family had put me in Shady Pines 4 years ago. My daughter, Margaret, had said it was because I needed full-time care. She'd said I had arthritis, and sometimes I forgot things and I needed to be somewhere that could take care of me. She'd said it very gently, very carefully, like she was explaining something complicated to a child. What she'd really meant was, "You're inconvenient. You're old. You're in the way." Margaret and her husband, David, had 2 daughters. My granddaughters, Sophia and Lily. I'd raised Sophia from the time she was born. My daughter had gone back to work, and I'd been the one in Sophia's life. I'd been the one who fed her, the one who changed her diapers, the one who taught her to walk, the one who was there for every first moment of her childhood. But I hadn't heard from Sophia in 3 years. Not a phone call, not a birthday card, not even a text message on my birthday. My other granddaughter, Lily, was younger. I'd seen her maybe 5 times since I came to the nursing home. Margaret had brought her once, and Lily had looked around the activity room like it was a prison. She'd been polite to me, but distant. Like I was a museum exhibit instead of her grandmother. I had a son, too, Robert. He lived in California. He called once a year on Christmas. He'd say, "Hi, Mom. How are you?" "Good. I'm glad." "Well, I hope you have a nice Christmas." And then he'd hang up. That was the extent of my relationship with my family. 1 call a year that lasted approximately 90 seconds. I folded the lottery ticket very carefully, and I put it in my pocket. I didn't tell anyone. Not the aides. Not the nurses. Not the other residents who would have asked me questions I didn't want to answer. I just waited. I waited to see what would happen when they found out. It took 3 days. 3 days for one of the other residents to recognize my name in the newspaper. 3 days for the story to spread from the news to the nursing home staff to my family. The phone in my room rang at 2 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. It was Margaret. Her voice sounded different. Excited. Like something wonderful had just happened to her. "Mom," she said, "I just saw the news. You won the lottery." "I did," I said quietly. "Mom, that's incredible. That's..."
"Mom, we need to talk about this."
"We need to figure out what you're going to do with the money. You can't stay in a nursing home. You should come live with David and me. We have plenty of space. We could set up a whole suite for you. You'd be comfortable." I listened to my daughter explain how wonderful it would be for me to come live with her. How she'd always wanted me to be closer. How the money was such a blessing. How God had finally answered their prayers. Their prayers, not my prayers.
Theirs.
I said, "Margaret, I need to think about this." "Well, don't take too long," she said. "David and I have already started thinking about the mortgage. This money could really help us pay things off. And honestly, Mom, with this kind of money, you don't have to stay in that place. You can afford to move wherever you want. Maybe you should buy a house. Somewhere nice. Somewhere we could all visit. She was already thinking about my money. My money that I'd never asked her to help me spend. My money that had appeared the moment the world knew I had it. If this moment breaks your heart too, just hit like, so she knows she's not forgotten. Because my heart broke in that moment. My heart broke because I understood something crystal clear. I understood that my family didn't love me. They never had. They'd just been waiting for me to become useful again. Within an hour, my phone rang again. It was Robert. He called from California. He called during work hours, something he'd never done before. He said, "Hi, Mom. I heard about the lottery. That's great. Listen, I was thinking. I've always wanted to start my own business. Maybe you could help me with that. Help me get started. I could make a lot of money, and I could visit you more often." My son, who I hadn't heard from in a year except for a 90-second Christmas call, was now asking me to fund his business dreams. I said, "Robert, I haven't even had time to process this yet. I know, but I just wanted to throw it out there. Think about it, okay? I really think this could be good for both of us." Both of us. My son wanted me to invest in his dreams with money that he had nothing to do with. That evening, Margaret called again. She said she'd talked to David, and they decided. They wanted me to come live with them. They wanted me to buy them a house. A big house where the whole family could gather. Margaret said, "Mom, think about it. All your grandchildren in one place. Family dinners. Quality time. Isn't that what you've always wanted?" What I'd always wanted was to see my granddaughters. What I'd always wanted was for my children to call me. What I'd always wanted was to matter to them. But not like this. Not because I had money. Have you ever felt unwanted in your own family? Tap that heart symbol so I know I'm not alone. Because that's what I felt. I felt unwanted. I felt used. I felt like the grandmother they'd forgotten about until I became valuable again. And that's when I made a decision. A decision that would change everything. I called a lawyer the next morning. Her name was Patricia Hughes, and she came to Shady Pines to see me. I explained everything to her. I explained about my family. I explained about the years of silence. I explained about the sudden phone calls. I explained about my granddaughters who didn't know me anymore. I explained about my son in California who only called on Christmas. And I asked her to help me do something that my family would never expect. I asked her to help me protect my money from the people I'd given everything to. Grandmas deserve love, not loneliness. Share this if you agree. Because I was about to discover that there's a difference between love and loyalty. A difference between family and the people you share DNA with. And I was about to make a decision that would teach my family a lesson they desperately needed to learn. But before I made that decision final, I needed to see them. I needed to look them in the eye and understand exactly what I was dealing with. I needed to understand whether they were capable of loving me for anything other than my bank account. I want to take you back to something. Back to when I still believed that family meant something. Back to a time when I thought love was unconditional. Back to a time when I didn't understand that sacrifice doesn't guarantee loyalty. I met my husband, William, in 1962. He was working at the textile factory where I was a secretary. He was the kind of man who noticed people, who remembered things they'd said in passing, who made you feel like you mattered. We were married 3 months after we met. We were so young. We thought we knew everything about forever. William and I built a life on very little money. He worked. I worked. We saved every penny. We had Margaret when I was 25 years old. And I remember holding her in the hospital and thinking that this was what mattered. This tiny human. This was everything. I gave him my job when Margaret was born. We couldn't afford childcare, and William thought I should stay home.
So I did.
I stayed home, and I raised my daughter, and I watched the years pass, and I watched the part of myself that was separate from being a mother slowly disappear. When Margaret was 4, I had Robert, and I loved him fiercely. But by that time, I was already disappearing. I was already becoming nothing but a mother, a provider, a woman who existed for other people's needs. William was a good man. He wasn't cruel. But he was a man of his generation. He didn't understand that I had dreams. that I had abilities, that I had a mind that wanted to engage with the world. All he knew was that I was his wife, that I took care of the children, that I kept the house, that I was there. And then William got sick. I was 42 years old. He was 44. The doctors said it was his heart. They said he didn't have long. They said I should prepare myself. I nursed my husband through his final months. I changed his sheets. I gave him his medicine. I sat next to his bed at night, and I watched him breathe. And I remembered all the years I'd spent being invisible to him. All the times I'd wanted to say something and I stayed quiet instead. All the conversations I'd imagined but never had. And then he was gone. He died on a Tuesday morning in March. And I was a widow at 42 with 2 children and no job prospects and a house that still smelled like him. I went to work. I worked as a housekeeper. I worked as a secretary. I worked 2 jobs for years. And Margaret and Robert grew up with a mother who was always tired. A mother who was always working. A mother who was present but not really present. Margaret grew up and she married David. And I was so hopeful. I thought that maybe with Margaret married, with her building her own life, I could finally be more than just her mother. I thought that maybe we could have a different kind of relationship now. But Margaret didn't want that. What Margaret wanted was for me to take care of her children. She went back to work when Sophia was born. And I was the one who watched her. I was the one who was there for every first moment. I was the one who changed her diapers and taught her to walk and stayed up with her when she had fevers. I loved that. I loved being Sophia's grandmother. I loved being needed. And I think that's when I made my biggest mistake. I think that's when I confused being needed with being loved. When Sophia was 8 years old, Margaret decided it was time for me to step back. She said Sophia was old enough. She said I was spoiling her.
She said I needed to have my own life.
What she really meant was, I don't need you anymore.
You can go away now.
I was 64 years old. I'd worked my entire life. I'd sacrificed everything for my family. And suddenly, I wasn't needed anymore. I retired. I lived alone in a small apartment. I tried to fill the silence with books and television and garden work. But I was empty. I was a woman who had given everything and suddenly had nothing to give anymore. I was a woman who had defined herself entirely by what I could do for other people, and suddenly there was no one to do things for. Margaret called me once a month,
just to check in.
She'd say, "Hi, Mom. How are you?" And I'd say, "I'm fine." And she'd say, "Good." And then she'd tell me about her life, about David's job, about the girls' school. And I'd listen and I'd try to be interested, but mostly I was listening to all the ways I was no longer part of her life. If you've ever given everything to your family and still felt invisible, tap heart symbol so I know you exist. Because that's what I was. I was invisible. I was a woman who had spent 64 years taking care of other people, and suddenly I was alone. And worse than that, I was forgotten. I called Sophia on her 16th birthday. We'd always had a special connection. Or, at least, I thought we did. I said, "Hi, sweetheart. Happy birthday. I want to hear all about you. Tell me what you've been up to." Sophia was polite. She thanked me for calling. But she didn't really have much to say to me. She was busy. She was in school. She had friends. She had a life that didn't include her grandmother. I cried after we hung up. I cried because I realized that I didn't know my granddaughter anymore. I didn't know what she was interested in. I didn't know if she had a boyfriend. I didn't know anything about the person she was becoming. I started having health problems when I was 74. Nothing dramatic. Just arthritis. Just the regular problems that come with aging. But I couldn't manage on my own anymore. I couldn't lift heavy things. I couldn't clean the apartment the way I wanted to. I needed help. I called Margaret and I asked if I could come stay with her. Just temporarily. Just until I felt better. And I heard something in her voice. I heard the sound of a daughter who did not want her mother in her house. She said, "Mom, I think it would be better for you to be somewhere that has professional care. Somewhere with doctors and nurses. Somewhere you can have your own space, but still have help when you need it." What she really said was, "I don't want you here. You're inconvenient. Go somewhere else. That's when I ended up at Shady Pines.
4 years ago.
And that's when I became invisible. Sometimes the ones we love most are the ones who break us. Comment true if you understand that pain. Because my family broke me, not with cruelty or anger. They broke me with neglect, with the slow, quiet decision to forget about me, with the understanding that I was no longer useful and therefore no longer worth their time. But then something happened. Then I found that lottery ticket in my pocket. And I realized something important. I realized that my family had been sending me messages the entire time. They were telling me very clearly what I was worth to them. And it wasn't much. A week after I won the lottery, I had Patricia Hughes, my lawyer, arrange a family meeting. I said I wanted to see everyone. I wanted everyone to come to Shady Pines. And they came. They all came. Margaret and David. Robert and his new wife, Jennifer. Sophia and Lily. My entire family gathered in one place for the first time in 3 years. They walked into the activity room where I was waiting, and I could see the calculation in their eyes. I could see them wondering how much money I had, how much they would get, what my death would mean to their lives. Margaret hugged me. It was the first hug she'd given me in 4 years. David shook my hand. Robert kissed my cheek. And I felt nothing. I felt like I was being hugged by strangers. We sat down at a table in the activity room, and I said, I wanted to see you all because I need to tell you something. I need to tell you what I've decided to do with my lottery money. I saw the hope light up in their eyes. I saw them lean forward. I saw them prepare to hear what they wanted to hear. And that's when Patricia handed me a document. It was a will. A new will. A will that I'd had Patricia draw up the week before. I looked at my family and I said, I'm giving my entire estate to the Shady Pines nursing home. I'm setting up a trust to provide care for residents who can't afford it. I'm establishing a memorial in honor of people like me, people who have been forgotten by their families. Have you ever cried alone so no one could see?
Just hit like, I'll understand.
Because the silence that followed my announcement was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. The disappointment on their faces. The realization that I'd given away their inheritance. The understanding that I would never be useful to them again. Margaret said, Mom, what have you done? And I said, very quietly, I've done what I should have done a long time ago. I've taken care of myself. But what I didn't tell them yet was something else. Something that would change everything. Something that Patricia had discovered while researching my family. Something that would prove that their betrayal of me was nothing compared to the betrayals they'd been hiding from each other. The lawyer's office is cold. That's the first thing I notice as we all sit around Patricia Hughes's conference table. Not the diplomas on the wall or the expensive furniture or the view of the city from the window. Just the cold. The kind of cold that reminds you that important things are about to happen in this room. Things that cannot be undone. Margaret sits across from me. Her face is pale. David is next to her, his jaw clenched. Robert is leaning back in his chair, trying to look confident, but I can see his hands shaking under the table. Jennifer, his new wife, is looking around like she's not sure why she was invited. Sophia and Lily are sitting in the back, quiet, not understanding what's happening. Patricia stands up. She has documents in her hand. She looks at me, and I nod. It's time. I've asked you all here, Patricia says, because my client would like to share something with you. Something that requires witnesses. Something that should be said out loud, so there's no misunderstanding. She looks directly at Margaret. Mrs. Reynolds, can you tell me about your financial situation? Margaret looks confused. That's private, she says. It is, Patricia agrees. Unless you're about to commit fraud with your mother's inheritance. Then it becomes my concern. The room goes very still. Patricia pulls out a stack of documents. She shows them to Margaret. I can see the color drain from my daughter's face. These are your financial records, Patricia says. These show that you and your husband have been in significant debt for the past 5 years. Debt that you've hidden from your family. Debt that you were hoping your mother's lottery winnings would solve. Margaret doesn't say anything. She just stares at the documents. Patricia turns to Robert. And you? You've been telling your mother that you want to start a business. But these documents show something different. They show that you've already started several businesses. Businesses that have all failed. Businesses that have left you with significant debts. Robert starts to say something, but Patricia cuts him off. In fact, she continues, I've discovered that both of you have been attempting to secure loans against anticipated inheritances. Loans that you couldn't qualify for on your own. Loans that you were planning to pay off with your mother's money. Low piano as truth unfolds. I watch my children realize that they've been caught. That their plans to use me have been exposed. That the money they were counting on is going to a nursing home instead of into their bank accounts. But there's more. Patricia takes a breath, and she says something that changes everything. However, she says, that's not actually the most serious issue in this family. She pulls out another set of documents. These are different. These are older. These are yellowed with age. I was doing background research on your family, Patricia says, looking at me. Your daughter Margaret asked me to verify your mental state. She wanted documentation that you were competent to make financial decisions. What I found instead was something else. Something that I think you need to know, Mrs. Morrison. Patricia slides the documents across the table. They're bank statements, dating back 5 years. Statements that show regular withdrawals from my accounts. Margaret, Patricia says, why were you withdrawing money from your mother's account without her knowledge or permission? Margaret's face goes completely white. I wouldn't. The withdrawals total $123,000, Patricia continues. Withdrawals that began 3 months after your mother was admitted to Shady Pines. Withdrawals that you made using a power of attorney that you obtained under false pretenses. Have you ever spoken the truth and still been blamed? Tap heart symbol if that pain feels familiar. Because in that moment, I understand that my daughter has been stealing from me for 4 years. Not a small amount. Not occasional emergencies. Systematic, deliberate theft. Margaret starts crying.
Mum, I'm sorry.
I needed help. David and I were struggling. The house payment was too high. I didn't know what to do. I was going to pay it back. I swear I was going to pay it back. With what? Patricia asks. With her lottery winnings? Is that the plan? No, Margaret looks at me with desperate eyes.
Mum, I'm sorry.
I made a mistake. I was wrong. I look at my daughter, and I don't feel angry. I feel sad. I feel like I'm watching someone I've known my entire life reveal that I never knew them at all. But Patricia isn't finished.
There's one more thing, she says.
She pulls out a recording device. She presses play. Margaret's voice comes through the speaker. It's a recording from 3 days ago. Margaret is talking to David. She's saying, if Mom gives us the money, we can finally get out of this mess. We can pay everything off and start over. We just have to convince her that we need it. Then David's voice says, do you think she's senile enough that we can get her declared incompetent? We could control the money that way. Then Margaret says, maybe. The nursing home thinks she's confused sometimes. We could use that. Silence after the final revelation. The room is absolutely silent. I watch my granddaughter Sophia stand up. I watch her walk out of the room without saying anything. I watch my granddaughter Lily start crying, not understanding what's happening, but understanding that something terrible has been exposed. Robert is staring at his sister like he doesn't recognize her. Jennifer is pulling away from him, clearly wondering what kind of family she's married into. What I've discovered, Patricia says very quietly, is that your mother gave you everything. And what you gave back was betrayal. Margaret tries to reach for me. She says, Mom, I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry.
Please don't do this to me. And I look at my daughter, this woman I raised, this woman I sacrificed everything for, and I say something very quietly. You did this to yourself. I stand up. My legs are shaking, but I stand up anyway. I look at each of my children. I look at their shame. I look at their disappointment that their plan failed. And I understand something that I should have understood a long time ago. I understand that I cannot give my love to people who don't respect me. That I cannot sacrifice myself for people who are willing to betray me. That I cannot be a mother to people who see me only as a resource. Sometimes all you have left is your dignity. Share this if you'd still choose respect over riches. Because I'm choosing dignity. I'm choosing to say no to my family. I'm choosing to take back my life from people who wanted to use me. Patricia says, Mrs. Morrison, I'm recommending that you press charges against your daughter for theft and fraud. I'm recommending that you file a restraining order against anyone attempting to contact you without legal representation present. Margaret cries out, Mom, please. But I don't answer her. I turn to Patricia and I say, Do it. Do all of it. As I'm leaving the office, Sophia catches up with me in the hallway. My granddaughter, who I haven't really known in 3 years, who I thought had forgotten me. She has tears on her face. Grandma, she says, I didn't know. I didn't know Mom was stealing from you. I didn't know any of this. I look at my granddaughter, and I see something I haven't seen in a long time. I see honesty. I see someone who actually cares about me. Will you come back to the nursing home with me? I ask her. And Sophia says yes. If this moment made your heart ache, please like this, for every mother who is never heard. Because I was heard. I was finally heard. Not by everyone. Not by my daughter or my son. But by someone. By my granddaughter. By a lawyer who believed me. By a system that protected me. But what I didn't know, as Sophia and I walked out of that office together, was that this wasn't the end of the story. That Margaret had one more plan. One final attempt to take what was mine. One last betrayal that would test everything I thought I understood about family and forgiveness. The courtroom is silent in the way that courtrooms become silent when something momentous is about to happen. It's a silence that holds consequence, that holds the weight of decisions that will echo through the rest of someone's life. The judge sits elevated above everything. Margaret sits at a defendant's table with her attorney. David is next to her, his face stone. Robert is in the gallery, trying to look like he's not part of this. But he is. Patricia discovered that he knew about Margaret's theft, that he benefited from it, that he did nothing to stop it. The charges are clear.
Theft. Fraud.
Attempted undue influence on an elderly person. Margaret's attorney tries to argue that she was struggling, that she needed help, that she was going to pay it back, that her intentions were not criminal. The prosecutor stands up and presents the evidence. The bank statements. The power of attorney obtained under false pretenses. The recordings. The emails where Margaret discusses her plans to declare her mother incompetent. The prosecutor says, Your Honor, this is not a daughter who needed help. This is a daughter who deliberately and systematically stole from her elderly mother while that mother was isolated in a nursing home. This is a daughter who is planning to have her mother declared incompetent so she could access the rest of her money. This is predatory behavior against a vulnerable elderly person. The judge looks at Margaret over his glasses. Mrs. Reynolds, do you have anything you wish to say before sentencing? Margaret stands up, and she cries. Real tears. She says, Your Honor, I made a terrible mistake. I was in financial trouble, and I panicked. I didn't think about what I was doing to my mother. I just thought about myself.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. Then she looks at me in the gallery.
Mom, I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry for what I did to you. And I don't respond. I just sit there. I look at my daughter, and I don't feel anything. That's the worst part. I don't feel anger. I don't feel vindication. I just feel empty. I feel like I'm looking at a stranger. The judge delivers his verdict. Margaret is sentenced to 3 years in state prison. David is sentenced to 2 years, convicted as an accomplice. Robert is given probation and ordered to repay half of what his sister stole. Jennifer sits in the gallery, completely stunned, realizing that her husband has been lying to her about his involvement. The judge turns to me and says, Mrs. Morrison, the court extends its sympathy for what you've endured. I nod. I don't say anything. There's nothing to say. After the verdict, Margaret tries to approach me outside the courthouse. But Patricia steps between us. I'm sorry, Margaret says to me over Patricia's shoulder. I'm so sorry. I know I can't take it back.
But please, Mom.
Please forgive me. I look at my daughter for what I suspect will be the last time. And I say, very quietly, I forgive you, Margaret. But I don't love you anymore. If seeing truth when gives you hope, tap heart symbol so more people see this. Because justice has been served. My daughter is going to prison.
My son-in-law is going to prison.
My money is safe. The nursing home will be funded. Other elderly people will be protected because of my courage to speak up. But victory tastes like ashes in my mouth. That evening, I sit in my room at Shady Pines with Sophia, my granddaughter who stood up for me when everyone else betrayed me. My granddaughter who came to the courthouse and held my hand while I testified against her mother. Grandma, she says, I want you to know that I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what Mom was doing. I know, I say. And I don't want to lose you, Sophia continues. I know you have every reason to hate my family, but please don't hate me. I'm sorry for everything they did. I take my granddaughter's hand and I say, I don't hate you, Sophia. You're the only one in this family who chose to do the right thing. You're the only one who chose truth over money. Can we start over? Sophia asks, can we rebuild our relationship? I look at my granddaughter, and I see hope in her eyes. I see someone who is trying. I see someone who is willing to be different than her mother. Yes, I say. I think we can. Sometimes justice takes time, but it always comes. Comment true if you believe that. Because I believed it. I spoke the truth and justice came. The guilty were punished. The innocent were protected. The right side won. But as I sit in my room that night, I think about my daughter. I think about the fact that she's going to prison. I think about the fact that I was the one who put her there. And I realize something that the court couldn't give me. I realize that justice and healing are not the same thing. Justice is what happened in that courtroom. Justice is my daughter going to prison. Justice is my money being protected. But healing is something else entirely. Healing would be if my daughter had never betrayed me. Healing would be if I still had a family. Healing would be if I didn't have to choose between protecting myself and protecting my daughter. They thought she was weak. She showed them what real strength looks like. Because I showed strength by speaking the truth. I showed strength by pressing charges. I showed strength by refusing to let my family use me anymore. But strength is lonely. And victory is hollow when it comes at the cost of losing your child. That night, I receive a letter. It's from Margaret, written before her sentencing. She writes, Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to visit me in prison. I don't expect anything from you anymore. But I want you to know that you were right about me. You were right that I was selfish. You were right that I was thinking only about myself. You were right about everything. And I hate myself for making you prove it in a courtroom. I hate myself for making you stand up and testify against me. I hate myself for betraying the one person who gave me everything. I'm going to spend the next 3 years thinking about what I've done. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be someone who deserves a mother.
I'm sorry, Mom.
I'm so sorry. I read that letter and I cry. Not tears of victory. Not tears of vindication. Just tears. The tears of a mother who has lost her daughter. The tears of a woman who has won everything and lost everything at the same time. Justice was done. The guilty were punished. The truth was told. My dignity was reclaimed. But can a mother's heart ever truly heal from having to send her own daughter to prison? 3 years later, I wake to the sound of birds singing outside my window. I'm 81 years old now. My hands have more age spots. My face has more lines. My hair is completely white. But when I look in the mirror, I see something I didn't see 3 years ago. I see a woman who chose herself. A woman who stood up for what was right. A woman who learned that the greatest gift you can give yourself is dignity. I moved out of Shady Pines 2 years ago. Not because I was healthier or because I didn't need care anymore. I moved because I'd given the nursing home enough of my money to build a new wing. Because I'd established a trust to help 50 elderly people every year. Because I'd transformed my pain into something meaningful. I live in a small house now. A cottage, really. Just 2 bedrooms and a garden. But it's mine. I own it outright. I filled it with my own photographs. Photographs of me, alone, smiling. Photographs of me with Sophia. Photographs of my life, not someone else's. Every morning, I sit on my porch with coffee and I watch the world wake up. I've learned that there's beauty in quiet. There's peace in solitude. There's freedom in not having to perform for anyone. If you've ever healed after heartbreak, tap heart symbol so I know I'm not alone. Because healing after my family's betrayal has been different from any other healing I've experienced. It's been slow. It's been complicated. It's involved forgiving myself for the years I spent making myself invisible. It's involved understanding that love and loyalty are not the same thing. It's involved learning that I matter. Sophia comes to see me every Sunday. She brings her boyfriend, Marcus. They sit on my porch, and we have coffee, and we talk about her week.
About her job.
About her dreams. About her life. Sophia is studying social work. She wants to help vulnerable elderly people. She says that watching what happened to me inspired her to make a difference. I told her that I'm proud of her. And I meant it. I'm proud of my granddaughter for being different than her mother. I'm proud of her for choosing integrity. I'm proud of her for standing up for me. Comment strong if you've ever had to stand alone and rebuild. Because I did stand alone. After the trial ended, after my daughter went to prison, after my son moved back to California to distance himself from the scandal, I had to learn how to live alone. I had to figure out who I was without a family to define me. I had to rebuild my life from the ground up. And I discovered something unexpected. I discovered that I had a life. A full, rich, complicated life that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. I discovered that I had friends. Carol, my neighbor from when I lived alone, still calls me every week. We talk for hours. She tells me about her grandchildren. I tell her about Sophia. We're the kind of friends who don't need much, just the knowledge that someone cares about you. I volunteer 3 days a week at a senior center. I work with elderly people who are isolated. I sit with them. I listen to them. I help them understand that they're not alone, that they're not invisible, that they matter. And I use my story to help them see that it's possible to survive betrayal and build a life on the other side of it. Grandmas deserve respect and love. Share this so everyone remembers that. Because I do deserve respect. Not because I'm anyone's mother or anyone's grandmother, but because I'm a human being who has survived pain. Because I'm a woman who has wisdom to offer. Because I'm a person whose life has value. My house has been transformed over these 3 years. I painted the walls soft colors. I hung photographs on the walls. I planted a garden with vegetables and flowers. I made this place a home in a way that Shady Pines never was. Every corner of my house is mine. Every memory is something I chose. Sometimes I think about Margaret. She's been in prison for almost 2 years. She'll be released in about a year. I think about what that means. I think about whether I'll see her again. I think about whether I'll ever be able to forgive her. And I've come to understand something. I understand that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Forgiveness doesn't mean inviting someone back into your life. Forgiveness just means releasing the anger that's poisoning you. And I've done that. I've released my anger at Margaret. But that doesn't mean I'm going to welcome her back into my life. That doesn't mean I'm going to pretend that what she did didn't destroy something inside me. Some people only realize too late what real wealth is. Because Margaret is learning that in prison. She's learning that money doesn't matter. That status doesn't matter. That what matters is being part of something real. Being connected to people who love you. Having a family who accepts you. And she threw all of that away. If this story touched your heart, like and comment to honor your own journey. Because I know that not everyone listening to this has experienced betrayal by family. But I know that everyone has felt abandoned. Everyone has felt used. Everyone has wondered if they're strong enough to survive what's being done to them. And I'm here to tell you that you are stronger than you think you are. Your life matters. Your dignity matters. Your peace matters. Last week, I received a letter from Margaret. She's been writing to me for the past year. I haven't responded, but I read each letter. In this latest one, she wrote, "Mom, I'm being released in 9 months. I don't expect you to want to see me. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I want you to know that I've spent every day in here thinking about what I did to you, about how I betrayed you, about how I hurt the person who gave me everything. And I don't know how to fix that. I don't know if I can ever be someone you can be proud of again.
But I want to try.
And when I get out, if you'll let me, I want to prove to you that I'm not the person I was. I want to rebuild the relationship I destroyed. I read that letter, and I cry. Not tears of vindication. Not tears of victory. Just tears. The tears of a mother who understands that her daughter is suffering, and who wants to believe that people can change, but who also understands that change isn't the same as fixing what's been broken. I haven't decided if I'll see Margaret when she gets out. I don't know if I'm strong enough for that. Or maybe I'm too strong for that. Maybe the strongest thing I can do is protect myself by staying away. That's something I'm still learning. That's something I'm still figuring out. What would you do if life gave you a second chance to reclaim peace? Because that's what I was given. I was given the chance to rebuild my life. I was given the chance to choose myself. I was given the chance to understand my own worth. And I chose to take those chances. I chose to speak the truth. I chose to press charges. I chose to give my money to a cause that mattered. I chose to live. But I also chose something else. I chose to leave space for forgiveness. Not for Margaret, but for myself. I chose to forgive myself for not seeing the betrayal sooner. I chose to forgive myself for making myself invisible. I chose to forgive myself for being human and vulnerable and capable of being hurt. Sometimes, even after betrayal, love still finds a way. Not the love that I had for my family. That love is gone. But the love that I have for myself. The love that says, you matter. You deserve to be here. Your life has value. That love has found a way. And it's the most important love I've ever felt. My cottage is quiet today. Sophia is at work. Marcus is traveling. Carol hasn't called yet. And I'm alone. But I'm not lonely. I'm at peace. And that's the greatest victory of all.